It's 1968. Triumph is the most respected motorcycle brand on earth. Harley-Davidson owns America, and everyone agrees on one thing. The Japanese cannot build a real motorcycle. 14 months later, that entire industry was in free fall. Then one motorcycle changed everything. 20 engineers, 6 months. A price tag that made the establishment look like a bad joke. This is the Honda CB750, the bike that created the Superbike era and accelerated the collapse of every manufacturer that couldn't keep up. Act 1, the world before. If you wanted a serious motorcycle in America in 1968, you had two choices, British or American. The Triumph Bonneville, the Norton Commando, the BSA Lightning, or a Harley V-twin. Icons, all of them, with racing pedigrees going back to before the First World War. They also leaked oil, not occasionally, constantly. British engines used a vertically split crankcase, two halves bolted together at the worst possible place. Oil seeped out no matter what you did. Every British bike owner kept a drip tray underneath. That was just life. The vibration was so bad that mirrors were decorative. Bolts worked loose on long rides, and the electrics, nearly every British bike ran on Lucas components. If you've owned a British bike, you already know what's coming. Joseph Lucas, inventor of the short circuit. Lucas, Prince of Darkness. Why do the British drink warm beer? Because Lucas makes their refrigerators. A Triumph Bonneville made roughly 46 horsepower and cost $1,600. A big Harley ran between 2,800 and 4,000. No electric start, drum brakes, 4 speeds. Maintenance was your entire weekend. Nobody in Coventry, Birmingham, or Milwaukee was worried about Japan. Honda was selling commuter bikes, cute little things. The CB450, Honda's biggest machine, had flopped in America. Too small, riders said. Japan's place was the entry-level market. Everyone agreed on that. Everyone was wrong. Act 2, The Man in the Park. June 1968. Soichiro Honda is sitting on a bench in a park in Switzerland. He watches a policeman ride in on a white motorcycle, climb off, and walk away. Honda thinks, that bike looks small. Then the penny drops. The bike isn't small. The officer is just much larger than any of Honda's Japanese test riders. The Triumph 750 suddenly looks like a toy under him. Honda went back to Japan and wrote in a company newsletter, "I knew then that our bikes wouldn't sell in foreign markets if we kept building them according to our Japanese perceptions. That's why I suddenly became enthusiastic about this. And it's why I started telling them to develop a bigger model as soon as possible." A project team had actually assembled in February 1968, 4 months earlier, driven by engineer Yoshiro Harada, who'd spent 1967 in America learning that riders didn't care how clever a 450 cubic centimeter engine was. They wanted displacement, torque, something that looked like it could eat the road. Harada also got intelligence that Triumph was building a 750 cubic centimeter triple, so the target was set. 750 cubic centimeters, minimum 67 horsepower. That number wasn't random. Harley-Davidson's 1,300 cubic centimeter V-twin barely made 66 horsepower. Honda wanted to beat America's most powerful production motorcycle with an engine half the size. 20 engineers, Project HM300, 6 months to a running prototype. Faster than anything Honda had attempted before, using computer-aided design years ahead of the industry. By mid-1968, an inline-four engine was running in a CB450 test chassis. Smooth, fast, and powerful enough that drum brakes couldn't manage it. That last problem forced a decision that would change motorcycle safety forever. Harada brought 2 brake specifications to Soichiro Honda, conventional drums or an untested hydraulic disc. He explained the disc might delay production. Honda's response was 4 words. Of course, the disc brakes. No committee, no review process. The founder heard the case and decided that 296mm Takako hydraulic disc would be the first on any mass-produced motorcycle in the world. Act 3, Tokyo, October 1968. October 28, 1968, the Tokyo Motor Show. The CB750 rotates on a floodlit plinth. 4 exhaust pipes, disc brake glinting at the front, an engine mounted separately so the crowd can study every detail up close. The spec sheet was a systematic destruction of every weakness in the British playbook. 736 cubic centimeters transverse inline-four, single overhead cam, 8 valves, 4 carburetors, a one-piece forged crankshaft on 5 main bearings, British twins ran on 2 or 3. Horizontally split crankcase, which sealed perfectly, no oil leaks. In 1968, that alone was practically unbelievable. 67 horsepower, 44 pound-feet of torque, quarter mile in 13.5 seconds at over 100 miles per hour. Top speed 124 miles per hour, faster than anything from Triumph, BSA, or Norton. Substantially quicker than any street Harley. 5-speed gearbox, electric start, 12-volt electrics. Turn signals, dual mirrors, kill switch. Features British manufacturers considered optional extras. Cycle World wrote that there would be no more falling bolts because of the vibrations. Imagine being a Triumph owner reading that while staring at your oil-stained garage floor. Cycle magazine called it the most sophisticated production bike ever built. Then journalists reached for a word to describe it and found there wasn't one. So they invented one. Superbike. That word had never been widely applied to a production motorcycle before the CB750. Honda didn't just enter a category, it created one. Act 4, Las Vegas, January 1969. January 1969. 2,000 American Honda dealers in Las Vegas. Soichiro Honda there personally, a man who hated leaving his factory. 4 pre-production CB750s on display. American Honda President Kiichiro Kawashima steps to the microphone. Then he announces the retail price. $1,495. The room explodes, 2,000 dealers on their feet, because they understand immediately. Large Harleys cost $2,800 to $4,000. British triples cost $2,500 and up. And Honda is offering more power, better brakes, electric start, 0 oil leaks, 4 cylinders, for $1,500. Dealers immediately marked the CB750 up by 35%, and buyers still fought to get one. Waiting lists formed before the bike was officially on sale. Honda's original sales forecast? 1,500 units per year. They weren't even sure Americans would want it, so they'd use cheap sandcast engine cases instead of expensive die-cast tooling. Why invest in mass production infrastructure for a bike nobody might buy? The forecast was revised to $1,500 a month, then $3,000 a month. Workers who'd never machined an integrated crankshaft were visiting car factories to learn how. Production went from 5 units a day to over 100. Honda had not remotely anticipated what they'd built. The first production CB750 rolled off the line on March 15, 1969. Only 7,414 of those early sandcast engines were made before Honda switched to die-cast. They're identifiable by the rougher finish on the cases. In 1969, nobody cared. Today, a clean sandcast CB750 brings $30,000 to $40,000 at auction. And the one-off prototype, the true first CB750, hand-built by Honda and sent to Bob Hansen in America in October 1968, sold at Meekum's Las Vegas auction on January 31, 2026. $313,500, confirmed by Haggerty as the most expensive Japanese motorcycle ever sold at auction. A bike Honda wasn't sure people would buy just set a world record. Act 5, Daytona, March 1970. Sales success is one thing, racing credibility is something else, and in America, if you couldn't win at Daytona, the argument wasn't over. For 1970, the AMA opened the rules to 750 cubic centimeters across all configurations. Honda entered 4 factory CR750s, race variants producing up to 96 horsepower, with over 200 new parts including magnesium crankcases. Hansen's rider, Dick Mann, 35 years old. 3-time Daytona runner-up. BSA had just dropped him. Too old, they said. Hansen called him up, 5,000 to ride, 10,000 to win. Mann said, "Jesus, Hansen, I need the ride." Then the mechanics found the problem. The cam chain tensioners were disintegrating. The magnesium cases were expanding under heat. 3 of the 4 bikes were compromised before race day. Lead mechanic Bob Jamieson pulled 4 stock CB750 engines and worked through the night, rebuilding the race bikes with CR750 internals and standard aluminum crankcases, from scratch, in hours. Race day. Mann's bike developed severe cam chain issues 10 laps from the end, running on 3 effective cylinders, burning oil badly. Hansen calculates he can lose a second a lap and still win. Honda's Japanese engineering chief Nakamura wants Mann to push harder. Hansen overrules him. Man crosses the line, burning oil like a derrick fire, barely a pint left in the tank. 2 seconds ahead of Gene Romero, 102.697 miles per hour average. Honda's first AMA national victory. Hansen's summary, 4 words. Bob Jamieson won Daytona. Shortly after, Hansen resigned in disgust. Honda refused to acknowledge the American team's contribution. He went to Kawasaki and spent the next decade helping them build bikes to beat the CB750. Nobody wins clean in this story, although the story does have a sense of humor. The man BSA said was too old, Dick Mann, went back to Daytona the very next year, rode a BSA Rocket 3, and won again. Act 6. The British Collapse. In 1959, British motorcycles held 49% of the American market. By 1973, 9%, a collapse of over 80% in 14 years. The CB750 accelerated that collapse. BSA. Once the world's largest motorcycle manufacturer, 1 in 4 bikes sold globally was a BSA at their peak. By 1971, they were losing £3 million a year. The government brokered a rescue merger with Norton Villiers. BSA production ended in 1973, 63 years finished. Triumph, the occupation, September 14, 1973. NVT, Managing Director Dennis Poor drives to the Triumph factory at Meriden, tells 1,700 workers their jobs are gone, then walks out without taking questions. He said he had an urgent meeting in London. The workers chained the factory gates, copies of the Coventry Telegraph with the headline Triumph Meriden to close were on sale at those very gates. They occupied the factory for 18 months. Eventually, the government funded a workers' cooperative. They made Bonnevilles. By 1978, the Bonneville was the best-selling European motorcycle in America. The workers had saved it. It wasn't enough. August 23, 1983. The cooperative declared bankruptcy. Factory demolished. Housing estate built on the land. They named the streets Bonneville Close and Daytona Drive. The postmortem. In 1975, the British government commissioned the Boston Consulting Group to explain what happened. Their diagnosis, segment retreat. British manufacturers had ceded each market segment to the Japanese one by one, under 250 cubic centimeters first, then 250 to 500, then everything below 500 cubic centimeters, until there was nowhere left to retreat to. The productivity gap was decisive. Honda's Suzuki factory, roughly 350 motorcycles per worker per year. NVT's best plant, 18. The fatal assumption, documented by BCG. British manufacturers genuinely believed the Japanese would never be able to build big motorcycles. By the time they found out they were wrong, there was nothing left to compete with. Act 7, The Panic, Kawasaki, New York Steak. In 1967, Kawasaki had been building their own 750 cubic centimeter inline-four, Project N600, prototypes tested successfully, production tooling being prepared. Then Honda unveiled the CB750 at the Tokyo Motor Show. Kawasaki halted the project and went back to the drawing board, launching a Me Too 750 after Honda would make them look like copycats. Instead, they went bigger. 903 cubic centimeters, double overhead cams. The internal code name, New York Steak, because in America, the best item on the menu was the New York Steak, and Kawasaki wanted to be the best motorcycle on the menu. They shipped prototypes to America disguised in Honda colors and badges to avoid detection. Tested them flat out at Talladega Superspeedway at over 140 miles per hour. In late 1972, the Kawasaki Z1 launched. 903 cubic centimeters, 82 horsepower, 130 miles per hour, quarter mile in around 12.3 seconds. It demolished the CB750 on every performance metric. The arms race was on. Suzuki, forced to reinvent. Suzuki had made exclusively two-stroke motorcycles for over 2 decades. The CB750's success forced them to reinvent themselves from the ground up. In 1976, the GS750, their first serious 4-stroke in 20-plus years, a DOHC inline-four. Cycle magazine called it the best motorcycle in the 750 class. Yamaha, the displacement war. Yamaha arrived in 1978 with the XS 1100, 1,101 cubic centimeters, shaft drive, At launch, the most powerful production motorcycle in the world. Cycle magazine, a Rolls-Royce with a blown Chrysler Hemi motor. The Big Four were now all competing in the inline-four Superbike space, a space that didn't exist before the CB750 created it. And it's a template that never left. Today, every Fireblade, ZX-10R, and BMW S1000RR still runs on the same architecture the CB750 proved to the world in 1968. 57 years later, still dominant. So what was the CB750 really? Not the most exotic motorcycle of 1969, not the first inline-four. MV Agusta had built a handful years earlier. Technically conservative, single cam, 2 valves per cylinder, chain drive. What made it revolutionary was the combination: race-bred technology, mass production reliability, a price that made the establishment look incompetent. Honda proved that motorcycles could be oil-tight, electrically dependable, smooth, fast, and affordable, all at once. Nobody had done that, and the industries that insisted it was impossible discovered they were the ones who couldn't do it. During final testing, Soichiro Honda rode the CB750. Afterwards, he offered the only unprompted praise his engineers ever heard from him. What a terrific, terrific machine. Then he walked away laughing. The man who'd started in a wooden shack with surplus war engines had just built the machine that would define what a motorcycle is for the next half-century. The CB750 didn't just copy what came before it, it replaced it. And then everybody copied the CB750. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.